The Tampa Bay Buccaneers in 2013 were a complete mess. Greg Schiano had lost control. The players failed to buy into what he was selling, basically. You had the Josh Freeman debacle. It was just a disaster of the season for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Now, off-season brings a lot of changes. In comes Lovie Smith, and you've got kind of a new feeling, a new buzz around this Buccaneers organization. They were very active players in the free agent market, getting guys like Michael Johnson and Alteron Werner on the defensive side of the ball, guys that really fit what Lovie Smith wants in his Tampa 2 system, bringing in guys like, excuse me, Evan Dietrich Smith to beef up the interior of that line, knowing that you were going to let go of Carl Nix and Devin Joseph. The trade of Mike Williams, getting rid of his contract and his problems and his distractions, bringing in a Josh McCown to be your kind of competition for a Mike Glennon, to be your temporary starter. All of these moves, what they've allowed the Tampa Bay Bucks to do, I think, is really be positioned well for a nice turnaround bounce back season in 2014 and really surprise and shock some people. I really love the addition of Lovie Smith for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers organization, and I hope it brings a lot of good things for him. Now, in terms of the Buccaneers, part of why I feel optimistic about their future going into 2014 and beyond is that they've had some big hits in the draft in recent years. You look at 2012, you got Mark Barron and muscle hamster Doug Martin in the first round. Those are two impact players, in particular Doug Martin. Yeah, he missed a good portion of 2013, but I'd assume he'd come back and be fine in 2014. Getting a stud outside linebacker, a candidate last year for Defensive Player of the Year, a real candidate at that, in Levante David. Their second-round pick in 2013, Jonathan Banks at corner. They've had some big hits, some nice hits here. They've had a couple of misses too. Daquan Bowers, a second-round pick in 2011, never really has provided that perimeter pass rush that he was expected to do when he was in that draft coming out of Clemson. There was one point in time, if you remember, people like Kuiper and McShay were talking about him as a potential top 5, top 10, maybe even number 1 overall candidate. Now we know why he wasn't. Another big miss, obviously, is trading away a first-round pick to get a guy like Darrelle Revis that ultimately only came in, played 1 year, and now you just let him go and he's gone and you got nothing in return for him. So that was a big miss for the organization too. They still have some questions. Last year's third-round pick, Mike Glennon, he was a Schiano and Dominic guy. Is he a Lovie Smith guy? I think with the signing of Josh McCown, that clearly indicates that he's not a Lovie Smith guy. But ultimately, is he going to be given a chance to compete for the starting job in 2014? Does the Buccaneers organization feel in any way that he could be a future franchise quarterback for them? You look at a guy like Adrian Claiborne, their first-round pick in 2011. Now, here's a guy that's been okay, but definitely hasn't been special and definitely hasn't given you the production you would want out of a defensive end that you took in the first round. Maybe the signing of a Michael Johnson, him on the other side, it will get more out of Adrian Claiborne. Maybe Claiborne will be a better fit in Lovie's Tampa 2 system. We shall see. But there are still some questions with this Tampa Bay Buccaneers organization. In terms of their draft picks, they have 6 of them, which isn't great for a team that finished as poorly as it did in 2013. But the good thing is there is talent on both sides of the football for the Buccaneers, and they're not really in a position where they have to have a ton of picks to accumulate young depth on the roster because they filled a lot of their holes via free agency. They have a total of 6 picks, a first, a second, a third, a fifth, a sixth, and a seventh. Those are their 6 picks right there. And with those picks and what they've done in free agency, you look at this organization, and to me, their draft strategy is very simple. It's got to be best player available on either side of the ball. It really doesn't matter. Now, you might put a little bit of an emphasis on speed and quickness on the defensive side of the football, and that might ultimately be the side of the football that Lovie Smith skews to a little bit because he is a defense guy, and that's what he feels is same thing as Chicago. That's going to be his team's identity, and that's going to be his quickest path to relevance and contending in the NFC South and in the NFC as a whole. So you might see an emphasis more on the defensive side of the football. But with their first-round pick, you could look at potentially guys like Mike Evans or Sammy Watkins. They might have to move up a little bit to get a Sammy Watkins, but they might not have to move up that much. And as a result, with the number of holes that they filled in free agency, they might be a little more willing, even with the limited picks they have in this draft, to do such a thing to move up to get a guy like a Sammy Watkins. Maybe they stay put and they take a guy like a Jake Matthews. Maybe they trade down a little bit and they get another guy for their defense. Maybe somebody like an Anthony Barr out of UCLA, whatever the case might be. In terms of the team needs for this organization, I don't think quarterback is the number one need, but it would be nice for them to get a young quarterback that Lovie Smith likes out of this draft at some point in time. Does that come in round one? I'm not convinced of that at this point. I think wide receiver is a big need. You need something opposite Vincent Jackson. I think the offensive line is still a need, both at tackle and guard. Even if they addressed it in free agency, they did. They still need more help there. They could use a young quarterback that could at least compete with Mike Glennon and compete with Josh McCown and sit and learn behind a Josh McCown and eventually take over. I think one thing that they're really lacking on the defensive side of the football is a middle linebacker that could do the things that Urlacher used to do for Lovie Smith in that cover two in Chicago. So I would not be surprised at all to see Tampa, with their second round pick, go in the direction of a middle linebacker, or even maybe trade back up into the bottom portion, the last couple of picks of round one, and take somebody like a CJ Mosley or Ryan Shazier from Ohio State. Tight end, even with signing Brandon Myers, they could use a young, more explosive tight end than a Brandon Myers. They could also use some depth on the defensive line. One thing Lovey has always loved over the years during his time in Chicago is having a bunch of interchangeable parts on the defensive line. He loves to be able to rotate in 3 or 4 defensive ends every game. He loves to be able to rotate in 4 or 5 defensive tackles every game. And now you've got guys like Gerald McCoy, and you've got guys like Michael Johnson, and hopefully they get more out of an Adrian Claiborne. He wants to have depth. He wants to keep those guys fresh throughout the game, so that way their speed, their quickness plays the same in the first quarter and it will in the fourth quarter. So this will be a key draft for the Buccaneers. They have afforded themselves the luxury, though, of being able to strictly go after the best available player, but they do need some impact talent with their first couple of picks. I expect them to do it, and I expect things to be very different for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in the 2014 season, that's for sure.